The boy offered his only bottle of water to the beggar everyone ignored. The next morning, a limousine stopped at his door, and his family's life changed forever. Trevor walked along a cracked sidewalk in a quiet neighborhood on the west side of Chicago. He was 11 years old, with dark brown skin and short curly hair. He wore second-hand clothes, but they were neat and clean, as his mother always washed them carefully. The buildings around him looked old, some with chipped paint and broken steps. Cars passed slowly, and voices mixed with distant sirens. It was a place where people struggled to pay rent and find work, but they tried to keep going. Trevor usually walked home alone after school. He carried a worn backpack with a few notebooks and pencils. Every day felt the same. He would leave school, walk through the same streets, and finally reach the small apartment he shared with his parents. His father, Daniel, had been looking for stable work for a long time, and his mother, Carla, spent most of her day cooking and cleaning. The apartment was cramped, with one bedroom shared among them. The walls were thin, and Trevor often heard neighbors arguing late at night. Still, this was home, and his parents did their best to make it feel safe. Inside their apartment, the kitchen was small. Carla used one old stove burner to prepare dinner. She tried her best to stretch their groceries, turning small amounts of rice and beans into a meal that could feed them for a whole day. Daniel was often out looking for jobs or doing small tasks for neighbors. He fixed broken cabinets, painted fences, and carried boxes at local stores. But these small jobs never paid much, and they never lasted long. Sometimes after Trevor went to bed, he heard his parents talking quietly in the living room about the electric bill or how they would cover next month's rent. He did not like to hear them worry. He wished he could help, but he was only a child. He had no real way to bring money home. What he had instead was a kind heart. Trevor remembered something he had seen a few months ago. On his way back from school, he saw a boy his age standing near a grocery store entrance, asking for help. Adults passed the boy without looking at him. Trevor watched and felt something sink inside his chest. That memory stayed with him. It seemed like nobody cared. Trevor decided he did not want to be like those people who ignored a child in need. He did not have money, but he wanted to help whenever he could, even in a small way. So he developed a habit. Each day at school, he got a carton of milk and a bottle of water with his lunch. He usually drank the milk at lunch, but he started saving the water bottle. After school, if he found someone who looked thirsty or tired, he would offer the bottle. If not, he would just bring it home and drink it later. He liked having a small plan to help someone if the opportunity came. The neighborhood was mostly made up of old brick buildings. Some had small shops at street level with apartments above. Paint chipped from doors and windows. A few people stood on corners, talking or waiting for a bus. The streets were not always safe, especially late at night, but Trevor's route was straightforward. He learned which streets were quieter and which corners to avoid. He kept his eyes open, careful but calm. He was used to this environment. At home, the mood was tense. Daniel had no steady work for over 2 months. Carla was trying to stretch their savings, but their savings were almost gone. Their fridge was almost empty, except for a carton of eggs and a half loaf of bread. Dinner that night would be something simple, maybe eggs with rice. Trevor saw the worry on his parents' faces. They tried not to show it, but he was not a little kid anymore. He understood. He wanted to tell them it would be okay, but he did not know how. So he stayed quiet, hugging his mother softly when he got home, and sitting at the small table with them, listening as they asked about his day at school. Trevor was a good student. He enjoyed reading and learning new words, but he also felt a certain heaviness when he studied. He could not stop thinking about their situation. He knew people struggled in this neighborhood. He saw it every day. People who could not find work, people who slept on benches, people who looked hungry. It made him wonder what he could do when he grew up. Maybe he could get a good job and help his family move somewhere better. Maybe he could help others in need. For now, he was only 11. He could only show kindness in small ways. That day ended like most others. He did his homework on a small kitchen table while his mother boiled rice. His father was out, trying to talk to a friend who might have a lead on a job at a warehouse. The air felt heavy. Trevor finished his schoolwork and prepared for bed. He slept on a small mattress in the corner of the living room. He listened quietly as his parents talked in low voices in their bedroom. They hoped for better times. They hoped for a break. He hoped it could help even a little. He turned on his side and closed his eyes. He could hear muffled voices in the apartment next door. He thought about his classmates who never worried about food or rent. He wondered if anyone ever helped them when they were in trouble. He tried to remember his teacher's words about kindness. Kindness was something you did, not just something you said. He tried to show it every day, even if it was small. Tomorrow he would go to school and save his bottle of water again. Maybe he would find someone who needed it. He did not know that the next day would bring a change he never expected. For now, he lay still, listening to his parents whisper in the other room. They were probably making plans to find work or stretch their groceries one more day. Trevor closed his eyes and hoped things would get better. He did not know how, but he believed in small acts of kindness. He believed something good could happen if he just kept his eyes open. He breathed slowly and felt the worn fabric of his blanket. The apartment was quiet now. Outside, a car door slammed, then faded. He let his thoughts drift and settle. Tomorrow was unknown, but he trusted his own intention. He closed his eyes and slept. Night passed without incident. Trevor woke early. He rubbed his eyes and stretched. The apartment was dim, and his parents were already awake. His mother stood near the stove, heating water for instant oatmeal. His father sat at the small table, tapping his fingers lightly. They both looked tired. Trevor wanted to ask if they had any good news, but he knew it was too soon. He decided to stay quiet and eat his breakfast. He ate slowly, spooning the plain oatmeal into his mouth. It was not tasty, but it was warm. After finishing, he rinsed his bowl in the tiny sink. He grabbed his backpack, checked his notebooks, and made sure he had a pencil. Then he kissed his mother's cheek and said goodbye. She smiled at him, though her eyes looked worried. His father nodded, still quiet. Outside, the morning air felt cool. Trevor walked along the sidewalk, passing a few neighbors on their way to work. He noticed how everyone seemed focused on their own problems. He reached the schoolyard and saw children chatting and playing. Some wore clean shoes and new backpacks. Others looked like him, wearing the same clothes as the day before. Trevor did not judge anyone. He understood that everyone was trying their best. In class, the teacher began with a review of yesterday's lesson. Trevor listened carefully, raising his hand sometimes to answer questions. He was not the best student, but he tried hard. He knew education was important. His parents always told him that a good education could open doors. He wanted those doors to open, not just for him, but for them. He wanted to help his family one day. Lunchtime arrived. Trevor received a small tray with a carton of milk, a bottle of water, a sandwich, and an apple. He drank the milk, ate half the sandwich, and saved the water bottle by slipping it into his backpack. He did not know if he would use it today, but he wanted to be ready. He ate the rest of the sandwich and the apple, then put the tray away. After lunch, Trevor returned to class. The afternoon passed quietly. He tried to pay attention, but his mind drifted to his parents' worries. He wished he could do something. He remembered the boy ignored months ago, and it reminded him that sometimes a small gesture meant a lot. He had no money, but he had kindness, and kindness cost nothing. When school ended, he stepped outside and began walking home. The sky was cloudy, and distant traffic hummed. He passed a few stores and a woman carrying heavy bags. Before he could offer help, she disappeared around the corner. He kept walking, feeling the weight of his backpack. He turned onto a quieter street and saw an old man sitting on the sidewalk, leaning against a brick wall. The man's clothes were torn and stained, and his face looked tired. People walked by without helping. Trevor paused. The old man looked thirsty. Trevor reached into his backpack and took out the water bottle. He approached slowly. "Here," Trevor said, holding out the bottle. "I think you need this more than I do." The old man looked up, surprised. He took the bottle with shaky hands. He whispered, "Thank you." He asked Trevor's name. Trevor told him. The old man smiled a little, and Trevor smiled back, feeling proud, but unsure what else to say. Trevor stood there for a moment. The old man took a small sip of water. He said softly, "You are a good boy, Trevor." Trevor nodded, then said he had to go. He did not look back as he left. He felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. He had done something kind, expecting nothing. That was enough. When Trevor reached home, his mother was in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner out of rice and bread. He almost told her about the old man, but he held back, feeling that this memory was his own for now. Instead, he asked if his father had found any leads on a job. She shook her head and said, "Maybe tomorrow." Trevor sat down and did his homework. He wrote answers carefully, but his thoughts returned to the old man. Where would he sleep tonight? Who would help him tomorrow? Trevor had no answer. He only had that small act of kindness. His father came home later looking tired and empty-handed. They ate dinner quietly. Trevor noticed how worried his parents were. He had no big solution to offer them. All he had done today was give water to a stranger. But maybe that small action would mean something, even if he could not see how. After dinner, Trevor washed his bowl and got ready for bed. He stretched out on his mattress in the living room. He tried to sleep, but his mind was restless. He imagined a world where everyone helped each other. Maybe people would not struggle alone. Maybe children would not watch their parents worry every night. Eventually, he fell asleep. He woke up early the next morning, hearing a strange sound outside. It sounded like a large car engine, deeper than the usual vehicles on their street. Trevor sat up. His parents were at the window, peering outside. He joined them, curiosity growing inside him. He saw a long black limousine parked in front of their building. He had never seen such a fancy car here before. It looked important. Trevor wondered who it belonged to and why it was here. People in the neighborhood were stepping outside to look. The limousine did not move. After a moment, the driver's door opened. A well-dressed man stepped out and walked around the car. Then the passenger door opened, and another man climbed out. Trevor's eyes widened. It was the same old man he had given water to yesterday, but he looked very different now. He wore a neat suit, and his posture was straight. He did not look tired or weak. He looked strong and confident. Trevor's mother whispered, "Who is that?" His father said nothing, just stared. Trevor felt his heart beat faster. The old man from yesterday was now standing on their street looking for someone. He glanced around, then looked directly at Trevor's building. Trevor's father opened the door. Trevor followed, stepping outside. The man smiled, met their eyes, and spoke. He introduced himself as Richard Langston. He said he was looking for Trevor. Trevor felt his stomach flip. He did not understand what was happening. Richard Langston reached into his pocket and held an envelope. Trevor's parents exchanged nervous glances. Neighbors watched from windows and doorsteps, whispering and pointing. Trevor stood still, waiting for an explanation. Trevor stood beside his parents on the sidewalk, looking at Richard Langston. The well-dressed man who had once worn torn clothes now appeared confident and calm. A few neighbors gathered nearby, curious about the limousine and the reason for this visit. Trevor felt uneasy and excited at the same time. He had never experienced anything like this in his neighborhood. Richard smiled at them and introduced himself. He said he was the same old man Trevor had helped the day before. He explained that he had been sitting on the street, dressed in worn clothes, to see if anyone would show him kindness. Trevor's simple act of offering his only bottle of water had impressed him. Richard said most people had ignored him, but Trevor did not. He wanted to thank Trevor and his family. Trevor's parents looked at each other uncertain. His mother asked why they had been chosen. She wondered how Richard knew where they lived. Richard replied that after meeting Trevor, he asked a few questions around the area. He learned about their struggles and decided to come in person. He understood this might seem strange, but he meant well. Trevor listened quietly, holding his backpack straps. He felt shy. He did not know what Richard wanted. Richard said he preferred to talk in private, so they moved closer to the apartment building. Neighbors watched, whispering among themselves. Trevor's parents did not invite Richard inside, feeling cautious. Richard understood and respected their decision to stay outside. He explained that he was a businessman with many investments. He had not always been wealthy. He knew what it was like to struggle. He often tested people's kindness by pretending to be poor, hoping to find someone who would help without any promise of reward. Trevor had done exactly that. Richard said Trevor's action proved that genuine kindness existed. Trevor's father folded his arms, trying to stay calm. He asked what Richard intended to do now. Richard removed an envelope from his jacket and handed it to Trevor's mother. She opened it carefully and gasped. Inside was a check for a large sum of money. Richard told them it was meant to cover Trevor's future college expenses. He said he believed that a boy who showed kindness deserved a chance at a better life. Trevor's mother's hands shook. His father stared, speechless. Trevor himself felt his heart pound. This was more money than they had ever seen. Richard told them this was not all. He also wanted to help Trevor's father find stable work. He had contacts who could offer him a decent job. The family stood there overwhelmed. Neighbors stepped closer, trying to listen. Trevor's father asked if this was some kind of trick. Richard shook his head. He said he did not expect anything in return. He simply wanted to reward a selfless act. He understood their suspicion and said they could think it over. He handed them a business card and suggested they call him once they decided. He thanked Trevor again for the water. He said such a small act could mean more than anyone realized. Then Richard walked back to the limousine, got in, and left. The neighbors murmured, confused and jealous. Trevor and his parents went upstairs to their small apartment, still in shock. They sat around the tiny kitchen table and placed the check in the center. Trevor's mother wanted to verify if it was real. Trevor's father said he would call the bank listed on the check. Trevor remained silent, still not believing what had just happened. His father went out to use a payphone. When he returned, he looked amazed. The check was real. The contact number was genuine. Richard Langston was indeed a wealthy businessman with a public reputation. This was not a scam. They could hardly believe it. They talked late into the evening. Trevor's parents worried about accepting such a gift. They did not want to feel indebted, but they also knew this could change Trevor's future. He could get a good education. They could stop living day to day with no safety net. Trevor listened, knowing this could lift a weight from his parents' shoulders. They decided to accept the help. Trevor's father would call Richard's contact about the job. They would deposit the check and set it aside for Trevor's college fund. They felt nervous about how others might react, but they knew they needed this. They had never asked for it. Trevor had simply been kind. Perhaps this was the world's way of returning that kindness. That night, Trevor tried to sleep. He could not stop thinking about how everything had changed in one day. Yesterday, he had nothing but a water bottle to give. Today, his family had hope. He wanted to remain humble and kind. He did not want to feel superior to anyone else. He decided he would continue helping others whenever he could. He wondered what tomorrow would bring. Maybe his father would get a stable job. Maybe they would finally have a chance to plan for the future without constant fear. Trevor smiled in the darkness of the apartment. He was grateful. He did not know if he deserved this, but he accepted it with a thankful heart. Eventually, he closed his eyes and slept, comforted by the idea that his family might have a better life. He understood that kindness, even small kindness, had meaning. It had brought them to this moment. He would not forget that. Trevor woke early the next day. He went to the kitchen, where his mother was boiling water for oatmeal. She looked calmer than before, as if a burden had been lifted. The check was hidden safely in a drawer. They planned to go to the bank later. Trevor's father held the business card, preparing to make the phone call Richard suggested. After breakfast, Trevor's father stepped outside to use the payphone. Trevor waited by the window, watching him speak. When he returned, he said that Richard's contact was polite and willing to help. They had a position at a local warehouse. It involved unloading goods and organizing shipments. It was steady, honest work. Trevor's father could start next week. They smiled at each other, relieved. This meant a regular paycheck. It meant not living in constant fear of unpaid bills. Trevor felt lighter. He left for school, carrying his backpack, feeling a sense of hope he had never felt before. He still saved his water bottle from lunch, because this habit now felt like part of who he was. He did not expect to meet more wealthy strangers, but he saw no reason to stop being kind. At school, Trevor focused on his lessons. He knew that someday, thanks to Richard's generosity, he might go to college. He wanted to do well now to prepare for that future. The day passed quietly. After school, he walked home, noticing the same old neighborhood, the same cracked sidewalks. But now, everything looked different through his eyes. He felt that he could imagine a better life ahead. At home, his mother greeted him with a small smile. She was able to cook pasta for dinner, a bit nicer than their usual simple meals. His father came home later and explained more about the new job. It would be stable work with regular hours. He seemed excited and a bit nervous. Trevor listened carefully. He understood that this would not fix all their problems overnight, but it was a start. Not everyone was happy for them. Neighbors began to whisper. Some said it was suspicious that Trevor's family had suddenly received a large sum of money and a job offer. Others accused them of tricking a rich man. Trevor overheard some of these remarks. They hurt him, but he tried not to show it. He knew the truth. He had done nothing wrong. At dinner, Trevor asked his parents about the gossip. His father told him to ignore it. He said people often talked when they saw someone else get something good. His mother agreed, saying they should focus on their own lives. They knew their intentions were pure. Trevor nodded, though it was not easy to ignore mean comments. He reminded himself that he could not control what others thought. A few days later, Trevor's father started working at the warehouse. He left early in the morning, wore clean clothes, and returned in the late afternoon, tired but proud. He finally had a stable job. He earned enough to help cover rent and food without constant worry. Still, at the warehouse, he faced some doubts from co-workers. They did not know him, and some looked at him with suspicion. He was determined to prove himself through hard work and respect. Meanwhile, Trevor continued his daily routine at school. He studied hard, wanting to justify the gift they had received. Sometimes he felt pressure. What if he failed to get into college one day? What if he disappointed Richard, who had invested in him? He tried to push these worries aside. He reminded himself that he was only 11. He had time to grow, learn, and prepare for the future. He would do his best. His mother managed their small income more comfortably now. They had enough to pay the bills on time. She still cooked simple meals, but they felt more secure. She sometimes reminded Trevor that good things can happen even when you least expect them. He agreed, though he still wondered why it happened to them and not to others. He had no answer, so he focused on being grateful and kind. One evening, Trevor watched a local news segment on their old TV. The reporter mentioned Richard Langston's name. They said he was known for helping families and individuals who showed kindness or potential. Trevor realized that he might not be the only one Richard had helped. Maybe there were many others. At first, this made Trevor feel less special. He wondered if his act of kindness mattered that much if Richard did this often. He thought about it for a while. He began to doubt whether his action had made any difference. Perhaps he was just another person on a list. He felt a little sad, but he did not want to complain. After all, his family's life was better now. Later that night, the phone rang. Trevor's father answered and then passed the phone to Trevor. On the line was Richard Langston. He asked how they were doing. Trevor said they were fine and thanked him again for everything. Then, feeling nervous, Trevor asked Richard about the news report. He said he knew Richard helped many people. He asked if his own kindness was really that important. Richard paused before answering. He told Trevor that his action mattered a great deal. He said that it was not about how many people he helped or how often he did this. It was about the choice Trevor made when he saw a man in need. Most people had ignored him, but Trevor had given what little he had. That decision was Trevor's alone, and it showed that even a small gesture could have a big impact. Richard said he hoped Trevor would never doubt the value of his kindness. The fact that others received help did not reduce the importance of Trevor's own action. Richard explained that each act of kindness was unique and important. He wished Trevor well and said goodbye. Trevor hung up feeling relieved. He understood now that his kindness was not measured by how rare it was, but by the honesty behind it. He did not need to compare himself to anyone else. He felt more confident and at peace. He got ready for bed, thinking about how life had changed. They still lived in the same small apartment, and they still had challenges. But now, they had a way forward. His father had a stable job, his mother worried less, and Trevor felt determined to study hard and use the opportunity he had been given. Trevor climbed onto his mattress, closed his eyes, and imagined a future where he could help others, just as Richard had helped him. He knew it would take time and effort, but he was ready to try. He fell asleep thinking about the difference one bottle of water had made. Trevor woke up to a quieter morning. His father had already left for work at the warehouse, and his mother was preparing a simple breakfast. There was less tension in the air, but Trevor still felt that their lives were changing in unexpected ways. He ate his oatmeal and thought about what he could do to remain true to himself. He had promised himself he would not forget the meaning of kindness. After finishing his meal, he picked up his backpack and left for school. On the way, he noticed a neighbor struggling with a heavy trash bag. Trevor stopped and offered to help. The neighbor hesitated, then allowed him to carry it to the curb. The neighbor thanked him, but the expression on her face suggested that she was still unsure of his family's recent good fortune. Trevor understood that people needed time to accept changes. At school, Trevor paid close attention in class. He thought about the college fund waiting for him in the future. It felt like a long way ahead, but he knew that each day of study mattered. He took notes, asked questions, and tried to improve his understanding of math and reading. The teacher noticed his effort and gave him a nod of approval. During lunch, Trevor saved his water bottle again. He remembered how one small gesture had changed his family's circumstances. He wondered if he should continue looking for people to help, or if that would seem forced. He decided that if he saw someone in need, he would help naturally. He did not want to turn kindness into a performance. He wanted it to be sincere. After school, Trevor walked home. The streets looked the same, but his perspective had shifted. He noticed a few neighbors eyeing him from their windows. He pretended not to notice. He understood that some people were jealous or confused. He could not control their feelings. At home, he found his mother sorting through old bills. She wanted to pay off some debts and plan better for the future. With his father's new job, they could slowly save some money. She looked tired but relieved. Trevor sat with her for a moment and asked if everything was okay. She said they were doing better, but they had to remain careful. She also reminded Trevor that the money for his college was locked away for that purpose alone, and that they should not touch it. Later in the evening, his father returned from the warehouse. He looked sweaty and a bit stressed. Trevor asked how his day had been. His father said the work was hard, and some co-workers seemed suspicious of him. He tried to show them he was reliable, but he felt that not everyone welcomed him. Trevor listened quietly. He knew his father was strong and honest, and he hoped the co-workers would recognize that over time. As they ate dinner, Trevor's father explained that he had overheard some men whispering about why he got this job so quickly. They did not know the full story and assumed he had connections. Trevor's father said he did not want to argue. He would let his work speak for itself. Trevor's mother agreed, saying that consistent effort would prove his worth. Trevor realized that even with the opportunities they received, life was not suddenly perfect. They still faced challenges. He thought about how people judged them without knowing the truth. He wished he could make them understand that they never asked for this help. They were just trying to build a better life. Over the next few days, Trevor focused on his studies and continued small acts of kindness as they came naturally. He helped a classmate understand a math problem. He held the door open for a teacher carrying books. He picked up a stray piece of trash in the hallway and tossed it in the bin. These were small things, but he believed they mattered. At the same time, his father tried to prove himself at the warehouse. He arrived early, worked steadily, and treated everyone respectfully. Some co-workers ignored him, but others began to warm up slightly. His father came home tired, but he did not complain. He was grateful for the chance to earn a stable wage. Trevor sometimes wondered if they deserved all this attention. He did not want to feel special. He only wanted a fair chance at a better future. He told his mother that he felt strange about being singled out. She reminded him that he did not choose this situation. He simply acted with kindness. She said they should accept help with gratitude and do their best in return. One afternoon, Trevor noticed a small group of neighbors gathered outside talking about them. He could hear bits of conversation through the open window. They questioned whether the money was real, whether Trevor's father would keep his job, and why Richard Langston had chosen their family. Trevor sighed. He knew they might never fully accept the truth. Still, he was determined not to let it bring him down. The following day, he walked home from school and passed by an older woman struggling with her grocery bags. Without a word, Trevor stepped forward and offered to carry one for her. She looked surprised, then allowed him to help. As they walked to her apartment building, she asked if he was that boy who got help from a rich man. Trevor said yes, but he did not go into detail. He only said he wanted to help people the way he always had. The woman nodded and thanked him when they reached her door. When Trevor returned home, he told his mother about this encounter. She smiled and said that was the kind of person he had always been. His father came home later and reported that his day at work had gone a little smoother. He managed to finish his tasks early, and a few co-workers gave him polite nods instead of suspicious looks. As the evening ended, Trevor realized that their lives were gradually changing. It was not a sudden transformation where everything became perfect. Instead, it was a slow process. They had more stability. They had a promise of a better future. They faced new challenges like prejudice and doubt, but they dealt with them step by step. Trevor went to bed feeling cautious but hopeful. He understood that receiving help had not solved all their problems. It had simply given them a chance to work toward their goals. He decided he would continue being kind, studying hard, and supporting his family. That was what mattered most. He closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of the night outside the window. A distant car horn, soft footsteps in the hall, and murmurs from neighbors drifted through the thin walls. He knew their journey was far from over, but at least they had a direction. He reminded himself that tomorrow he would get up, attend school, and try his best once again. In small ways, step by step, he would keep proving that kindness was real and meaningful. He relaxed his body and drifted into sleep. The next morning, Trevor woke before the sun rose. He quietly dressed and joined his father at the kitchen table. His father was preparing to leave for work, sipping plain tea. They did not speak much, but they exchanged a nod of understanding. There was no need for many words. Each day brought new tasks and challenges, and they faced them as best they could. After his father left, Trevor helped his mother with a few chores before heading to school. The air felt slightly cooler, and he noticed leaves starting to fall from the trees lining the street. He walked carefully, watching a group of children running ahead, laughing about something he could not hear. He wondered if they knew anything about him or his family's situation. Maybe they did, maybe they did not. Either way, he planned to keep moving forward. At school, Trevor focused on his lessons. He listened to the teacher explain a reading assignment and tried to understand new words. He knew that strong reading skills would help him succeed later. He still thought about college and the opportunities waiting for him. This chance was not common in his neighborhood. He wanted to make the most of it. During lunch, Trevor carried his tray outside and sat alone for a moment. He watched other children talking and laughing. He saved his water bottle as usual. He did not know if anyone would need it today, but he kept it ready. It had become part of who he was. After school, Trevor walked home and stopped by a newspaper stand. A headline mentioned Richard Langston. It said Richard had donated a large sum to a local community center. Trevor felt a slight doubt return. He remembered Richard's words that each act of kindness was important, but he could not stop wondering if his own kindness had been just one among many. He tried to push that thought away. At home, his mother had organized their small space more efficiently. She said that with his father's income, they could fix a few things. She smiled and seemed more at ease. Trevor knew these changes were gradual, but they meant a lot. Later that day, his father returned from the warehouse, looking tired but not stressed. He said he had done his tasks well, and the supervisor praised him again. Although some co-workers remained distant, a few had started greeting him politely. Trevor's father considered this a positive sign. Trust took time, but steady effort made a difference. Trevor realized that progress did not come instantly. Just as their neighbors needed time to accept their new situation, and just as his father's co-workers needed time to trust him, Trevor needed time to fully understand his own feelings. Life was never simple, and that was okay. After dinner, Trevor stepped outside for a short walk. He saw a young boy struggling with a bundle of newspapers. Trevor offered to help, carrying some of them for a block until the boy reached his delivery spot. The boy thanked him and rushed off. Trevor felt good about helping someone again. This small act reminded him that kindness did not need to be grand. It just needed to be real. When Trevor returned home, he told his mother what he had done. She was pleased that he remained true to himself. She said that every small good deed mattered, even if no one else noticed. Trevor nodded. He understood that not every kind act led to big changes, but that was not the point. Trevor thought about calling Richard Langston again. He asked his father if it would be okay. His father agreed, and they borrowed a neighbor's cell phone. Trevor dialed the number and waited, feeling a bit nervous. Richard answered, sounding calm and friendly. Trevor thanked him again and updated him on their progress. His father had stable work, and Trevor was doing better in school. He mentioned that he was still helping people in small ways. Richard listened and then asked if Trevor had any worries. Trevor confessed that sometimes he still wondered if his kindness was special. Richard repeated that kindness should not be compared. It was not about being the only one who helped. It was about making a choice when others ignored someone in need. Richard reminded him that the moment he gave that bottle of water, he acted from a pure place in his heart. That was what mattered. Trevor thanked Richard for the reassurance. He understood now that his doubts were natural, but they did not have to define how he felt. Kindness was not measured by how rare it was. It was measured by the honesty behind it. After hanging up, Trevor told his parents about the conversation. They smiled, relieved that he had found comfort in Richard's words. Trevor's mother said that life was filled with many helpers. That did not make Trevor's kindness any less real. That night, Trevor lay in bed and listened to the familiar sounds of the neighborhood. He heard distant voices, a car passing by, and the hum of everyday life. He knew tomorrow he would return to school, do his homework, and look for chances to help others. He did not need praise or fortune for his actions. He just needed to be himself. He thought about how his father was gaining respect at work through consistent effort. He thought about his mother managing their household more confidently. He thought about the trust Richard had placed in him. All these things formed a picture of slow but meaningful growth. Trevor closed his eyes, holding on to the understanding that kindness was its own reward. He no longer questioned whether his act mattered. He knew it did, in its own quiet way. He would keep showing kindness, studying, and supporting his family. Over time, they would build a better life. That was enough. Trevor woke up and noticed that his father had left for work even earlier than usual. There was an important delivery scheduled at the warehouse, and his father wanted to show that he could handle any task. Trevor's mother was making toast with a bit of butter. She looked calmer now, as if they had settled into a steady routine. Trevor ate slowly, thinking about what lay ahead. At school, he followed his normal schedule. He listened to the teacher's lessons, took notes, and did his assignments as carefully as he could. He knew that each day of studying counted toward his future. He still thought about the college fund Richard Langston had provided. He wanted to be worthy of that opportunity. He wanted to learn as much as possible so he could make a real difference when he grew up. During lunch, he overheard a teacher talking about a writing contest that would be held in a few weeks. The contest would award a small prize to the student who wrote the best personal essay on a chosen theme. Trevor found out that the theme was the impact of a single kind act. His heart skipped a beat when he heard the topic. It felt connected to his own experience. He wondered if he should enter. He had never won any contests before. Writing made him nervous because he worried he might not be good enough. That afternoon, he walked home, carrying his backpack and thinking about the contest. He remembered the day he offered a water bottle to a stranger. He thought about how that simple action had changed his family's situation. He never expected anything in return, yet it happened. He could write about that experience, but what if people thought he was bragging? He did not want to appear as if he did it for attention. He decided to think more before making a final decision. At home, his mother was folding laundry and asked him about his day. Trevor told her about the writing contest. She encouraged him to try, saying that telling his story honestly might inspire others. She reminded him that the essay did not have to prove anything. It just needed to be true. Trevor's father came home later, tired but satisfied. He said the delivery went smoothly, and the supervisor praised his efficiency. A few co-workers had helped him, and he was grateful. Over the next few days, Trevor paid close attention to the details of his everyday life. He continued performing small acts of kindness. He held the door for classmates, offered to help a student who dropped his books, and listened to a friend who seemed upset after class. These acts did not lead to any big reward. They were simply the way he wanted to live. Each time he helped someone, he felt more certain that kindness was not about impressing others. It was about caring. At the warehouse, Trevor's father worked steadily, and each day he felt more at ease. Some co-workers remained distant, but a small group started to trust him. He was learning how to handle different types of shipments and tools. He came home tired, but with a sense of pride. This steady improvement made Trevor hopeful. His father had always been hard-working, and now he had a place to prove it. One weekend, Trevor and his family went to a small community event at a local park. Neighbors gathered to sell handmade crafts, share snacks, and play music. Trevor noticed that some people were still unsure about his family's recent good fortune, but others were friendly. He did not force conversations, but if someone approached him, he responded politely. During the event, Trevor saw an older neighbor struggling to carry a box of cups for a stand. Without thinking twice, Trevor offered to help. The neighbor hesitated, then accepted. After they placed the box down, the neighbor thanked him quietly, as if surprised that Trevor was still being helpful, even after receiving a large sum of money. Trevor said it was no big deal. He understood that some people expected him to change because of what happened, but he had not changed. He was still the same boy. Later that night at home, Trevor considered the writing contest again. He had about 2 weeks to write and submit the essay. If he wrote about the day he gave the water bottle to Richard Langston, he would need to be honest and clear. He would say that he never expected anything. He would admit that it felt strange to receive such a huge reward for something so small. Maybe that honesty could help others understand that good deeds should come from the heart, not from hope of gain. He decided to try. He took out a notebook and began writing a rough draft. He described his neighborhood, his family's struggles, and the moment he saw the old man sitting on the ground. He wrote about how he felt when he offered the water bottle, the surprise he felt the next morning, and how life changed. He did not hide that it was hard sometimes, dealing with doubt and judgment. He explained that he learned that kindness is its own reward. He worked slowly, erasing sentences and rewriting them until they felt true and simple. As he wrote, he realized that this essay was not about convincing anyone of anything. It was just his story. If he won, that would be nice. If not, at least he would have spoken his truth. He showed a draft to his mother. She read it quietly and said it sounded honest and clear. She said he could revise it a bit more, but it was already good. In the following days, Trevor refined his essay. He kept the language simple, just like his thoughts. He submitted it before the deadline and tried not to think about it too much. He continued his usual routine of school, chores, and small acts of kindness. He focused on his studies and waited patiently. The day of the results arrived. After school, a teacher approached him in the hallway and said the judges would announce the winner at a small assembly the next day. Trevor nodded, feeling nervous. That evening, he told his parents. They encouraged him, saying that whatever happened, they were proud of him for sharing his story. His father patted his shoulder and said that taking a chance was an act of courage. Trevor lay in bed that night, thinking about the choices he had made. He never planned any of this. He never thought that giving a bottle of water to someone could lead to so many changes. Now he had written it all down, honestly and simply. He wondered if his words would connect with others. He tried to relax, reminding himself that he did his best. He fell asleep, hopeful and calm. The next morning, Trevor woke up feeling a bit anxious. He remembered that the essay contest winner would be announced at the school assembly. He went through his morning routine, eating his breakfast, checking his backpack, and walking to school. He tried to keep his mind steady, telling himself that whatever happened, he would accept it. At school, the hallway felt warmer and busier than usual. Students hurried to their classrooms, and Trevor took his seat. The teacher announced that after the first lesson, everyone would gather in the auditorium. Trevor's heart beat faster. He looked at the clock, waiting patiently. When the time came, classes lined up and walked to the auditorium. Teachers stood at the front, holding a small microphone. The principal greeted everyone and said they were proud of all the students who entered the contest. He mentioned that several essays were thoughtful, but one stood out for its honesty and message. Trevor listened carefully. He tried not to get his hopes up, but he could not help feeling hopeful. The principal said the winning essay described how one act of kindness could change lives, not just by bringing unexpected rewards, but by showing that good deeds do not require a reason. They just need sincerity. Then he read the first lines of the essay. Trevor recognized his words. He felt his cheeks grow warm and his heart beat faster. The principal announced Trevor's name. The auditorium clapped, and some students turned to look at him. Trevor stood up, feeling both proud and shy. He walked to the stage, and the principal handed him a small certificate and a gift card for a local bookstore. Trevor thanked the principal quietly. He could hear a few classmates whispering about how he deserved it. Others looked surprised. Trevor returned to his seat with the certificate in hand, feeling a mixture of relief and happiness. He realized that his words had reached people. He had told his truth, and that mattered. After the assembly, a few students approached him. They said his essay made them think about how they treated others. One girl mentioned that she never really thought a small act could matter that much. Trevor nodded and said he had learned that you never know how much your actions might mean to someone else. He went home that afternoon carrying the certificate in his backpack. He showed it to his mother, who hugged him and said she was proud. His father returned from work later, and Trevor handed him the certificate. His father read it and smiled, patting Trevor's back. He said this was proof that truth and kindness had value in the world. Trevor's mother said they should celebrate with a small treat. She made a simple cake from the ingredients they had. That evening, the family sat together, eating cake and talking more comfortably than they had in a long time. Trevor's father mentioned that he had received positive feedback from his supervisor at the warehouse. Some co-workers were still distant, but it bothered him less now. He knew that trust grew over time. They also talked about how their finances were more stable. They could pay the bills without fear. Trevor was still saving for college. Everything felt more secure. Trevor also noticed that some neighbors treated them with more respect now. Maybe they realized that the family was not showing off. They were just living honestly, taking advantage of the help they received without becoming arrogant. Trevor understood that this gradual acceptance was a good sign. He had learned to be patient with people's opinions. Over the next few days, life continued as usual. Trevor studied, helped around the house, and looked for small ways to be helpful to others. He stayed after class one day to help a teacher organize library books. Another day, he helped a younger student find a missing jacket. These small acts did not attract attention or reward. They were just part of who he was. When Trevor visited a small corner store, the owner recognized him and congratulated him on winning the contest. Trevor thanked her and bought a few small items with the allowance he received for helping his parents with chores. He noticed that the store owner's attitude was warmer now, as if she understood him better. One afternoon, Trevor received a letter. It was from Richard Langston. Inside, Richard congratulated him on his essay win. He said that he was pleased to see Trevor using his experience to inspire others. He reminded Trevor that education was a powerful tool, and he hoped Trevor would continue studying hard. Trevor smiled at the letter and placed it in a safe spot with his certificate. That night, he talked with his parents. They discussed the future calmly. His father said he would continue working hard at the warehouse. His mother mentioned that maybe one day they could move to a slightly bigger apartment. Trevor nodded, but he did not feel in a rush to change everything. They were stable now, and that was enough for the moment. Trevor also thought about his brother, who had left long ago. He wondered if his brother would ever return. He had no answer, but he hoped that one day they might reconnect. Until then, he focused on the present. He had school, his family, and a future ahead. He prepared for bed, reflecting on his journey. The contest was a reminder that he could share his story and make a difference in someone's perspective. He also realized that his fears about not being good enough as a writer or as a student were just doubts. He had overcome them by being honest and staying true to himself. As he lay on his mattress, he felt grateful. He understood that the path they were on was not perfect, but it was theirs to follow. They had a direction now, and they were building a better life step by step. Before drifting off to sleep, he recalled Richard's words about looking beyond appearances. Trevor had done that when he helped the stranger who turned out to be Richard. He had learned that people's true worth was not always visible at first glance. He had also learned that kindness needed no audience or reward. He closed his eyes, thinking about what the next day would bring. He would wake up, go to school, continue studying, and look for small chances to help others. The future was not guaranteed, but he had hope. He had his family's support, and he had a sense of purpose. He let his mind settle and drifted into a peaceful sleep. Trevor woke up on a quiet morning. Outside the window, light peeked through the old curtains. He got dressed and ate a small breakfast with his parents. There was no major event planned for the day, but he felt a sense of steady progress in their lives. His father left for the warehouse as usual, and his mother mentioned that they had enough savings to cover the next few months without worry. This was new territory for them, a feeling of stability they had never experienced before. Trevor walked to school, passing the same worn sidewalks and cracked walls. Yet his perspective was different now. He appreciated the small steps forward they had taken. He thought about the essay he had won, the praise he received, and how people saw him differently. He reminded himself not to let that change his basic values. He wanted to remain the same boy who cared about others. At school, he noticed a poster on the wall about a community service day. Students were invited to help clean up the schoolyard and nearby streets. Trevor decided to sign up. He wanted to continue making positive contributions. He understood that not every act led to a big change, but many small acts added up over time. During class, he focused on his lessons, making sure to review old notes and improve his understanding of each subject. He still had a long way to go before college, but every year of education built a stronger foundation. He believed that if he worked hard, the future would hold more opportunities. At lunch, he sat with a few classmates. They talked about everyday things. One girl mentioned that since reading Trevor's essay, she started paying more attention to how she treated people. She said she tried to be kinder, even in small ways. Trevor nodded, glad that his words had resonated. He did not boast. He simply said he was happy to hear that. After school, he returned home. His mother showed him a few letters they had received. Some were advertisements, and one was a notice about a local parent-teacher meeting. His mother planned to attend to learn more about how Trevor was doing in class. She said now that they had more stability, they could focus on his education more closely. Trevor did his homework at the kitchen table. He worked steadily, checking his answers and looking up words he did not understand. His mother helped when she could. He remembered a time when they were too worried about paying bills to focus on his homework. Now they could sit calmly and plan his future. It felt good. In the evening, his father returned, looking less tired than before. He reported that the warehouse work had become routine, and he felt more accepted by his coworkers. Some even asked him questions about his past experiences, and he shared small details about the odd jobs he had done before. They began to see him as a reliable teammate, not just a newcomer who received a break. Trevor's father also mentioned that the supervisor hinted at the possibility of a small pay raise in the future. It would not be large, but it was a sign of trust and appreciation. Trevor felt proud of his father. With time and patience, he had earned respect through honest work. That night, Trevor thought about how far they had come. He remembered the days when he saved his water bottle at school without knowing who he might give it to. He thought about that moment on the sidewalk when he saw Richard Langston disguised as a tired old man. He never imagined that day would change so much. Now he understood that life could surprise you. He also remembered that Richard advised him to look beyond appearances. Trevor realized that he was now doing that in many areas of his life. He understood that people were complex, and everyone had their struggles. He did not judge others by their clothes or their attitude at first glance. Instead, he tried to remain patient and kind. The next morning, Trevor joined the community service activity at school. He spent a few hours picking up trash around the playground and planting small flowers along the fence. Some teachers and students worked alongside him. It felt good to contribute to a cleaner, brighter space. He did not expect any special praise. He just liked the idea that the younger kids would have a nicer place to play. When he finished, he walked home feeling satisfied. His mother noticed dirt on his shoes, and he explained what he had been doing. She approved of his efforts. She said that when he grew older and went to college, these experiences would help him understand the world better. He agreed. He did not know exactly what he would study one day, but he knew he wanted to do something that helped others. As the evening arrived, Trevor thought about what lay ahead. He still had challenges to face. He did not have all the answers, but he had a direction. He had support from his family. He had seen how kindness could open doors. He did not think every problem in life would be solved easily, but now he had hope. Hope was a powerful thing. It kept him moving forward, one step at a time. He did his homework, ate a simple dinner, and listened to his parents talk quietly about their plans. They considered improving their apartment a bit, maybe fixing the bathroom sink or repainting the walls. Small improvements, done slowly, could make the place feel more like home. Trevor smiled, liking the idea that they were not just surviving anymore. They were building something better. That night, he lay in bed, remembering how uncertain life had been before. He still respected the struggles they faced. He knew that many families in his neighborhood were still having a hard time. He could not fix everyone's problems, but maybe he could show understanding and compassion. Maybe, as he got older and more educated, he could find ways to help others more effectively. He closed his eyes, feeling the gentle rhythm of the apartment. Nothing dramatic happened that day, but that was fine. A quiet sense of progress was enough. Tomorrow would come, and he would face it with the same honest effort and kindness that had guided him so far. Trevor stepped into the classroom as a new school term began. He was older now, though still young. He had grown a few inches, and his clothes fit differently. His teachers noticed that he was more confident, more willing to participate and share his ideas. He remembered the gift that Richard Langston had given him, and how it changed everything. Even though he would not attend college for several more years, the promise of that opportunity shaped his choices every day. Outside of school, Trevor continued to help neighbors when possible. He offered to carry groceries, pick up dropped items, and give directions to strangers. He became known as a polite and helpful boy in the neighborhood. Over time, people who once doubted his family's good fortune accepted that this was simply who he was. They stopped whispering, and some greeted him with friendly smiles. His father's job at the warehouse stabilized further. He received that small pay raise the supervisor had mentioned. It allowed the family to fix the bathroom sink and repaint the living room walls. The apartment looked brighter and felt more comfortable. His mother arranged the furniture, giving the space a fresher look. These changes were small, but they felt like steps toward a better life. Trevor's mother sometimes talked with him about his plans for the future. He said he was not sure yet what he wanted to study. Maybe he would become a teacher or work in a field that helped the community. The important thing, he said, was that he would have the chance to choose. That was something he never took for granted. Over the next months, Trevor dedicated himself to his studies. He read extra books from the school library, improved his math skills, and practiced writing essays. He remembered the essay contest he had won. That memory reminded him that he could share his thoughts in a clear and honest way. It also reminded him that personal experiences could inspire others. He kept in touch with Richard Langston occasionally, sending a short note or receiving one. Richard never asked for anything. He simply encouraged Trevor and asked about his family. Trevor appreciated this steady, quiet support. It showed that Richard believed in him not just as a symbol of kindness, but as a young person with potential. The neighborhood around them slowly changed too. Some families moved in, some moved out. Stores opened and closed. Life kept shifting, but Trevor's family stood on firmer ground now. They had a routine, a sense of purpose, and less fear of the future. They still lived modestly, but they had more control over their choices. One late afternoon, as Trevor walked home, he passed the spot where he had once given that water bottle to Richard. The sidewalk looked the same, cracked concrete, old brick walls. He paused for a moment, recalling the scene. He realized that nothing about that spot had changed physically, but his life had changed enormously since that day. He learned that small acts of kindness could reach far beyond what anyone expected. Reaching home, he found his father reading a local newspaper, searching for better job opportunities. His mother was trying a new recipe, and the aroma filled the apartment. Trevor set down his backpack and helped arrange plates on the table. They did not speak about big plans or dreams that evening. They just enjoyed their meal together, comfortable and hopeful. As time passed, Trevor understood that the key lesson he learned was not about receiving money or opportunities. It was about understanding the power of kindness and the importance of staying true to oneself, even when circumstances change. He knew that he had acted without expecting anything in return. That fact never changed, no matter what followed. In the following weeks, Trevor's teachers noticed his improvement. He participated in a school fair, where he helped guide younger students through simple learning activities. He enjoyed seeing them learn new things. He understood that helping others did not always require a grand gesture. Sometimes it was about being patient and supportive in small ways. At home, his parents discussed long-term goals. Maybe one day they could afford a slightly larger apartment or consider a better neighborhood. Trevor said he would support any decision that helped them live more comfortably, but he also said he did not feel ashamed of where they came from. This place, however humble, had taught him many lessons. On his way to school one morning, Trevor noticed a boy younger than himself struggling with a loose shoelace. The boy looked frustrated, near tears because he could not tie it properly. Trevor knelt down and offered help. He tied the shoelace carefully and showed the boy the steps. The boy nodded and thanked him. Trevor stood up and continued on his way, smiling softly. It was a small moment, but it mattered to that boy. That evening, Trevor relaxed in the living room, thinking about his journey. He realized that he was becoming the kind of person he wanted to be, someone who understood that small actions could make a positive difference. He did not need constant praise or rewards. He just wanted to do what felt right. He remembered the 3 acts of the story he had lived through: the early struggles with his family, the unexpected opportunity that came from helping a stranger, and the gradual growth into a more stable and hopeful life. He knew they were still in the 3rd act, still building their future, but they had everything they needed to move forward. Trevor's mother asked if he had finished his homework. He said yes. His father asked if he had thought more about college majors. Trevor said he was still exploring ideas. They smiled at his response, understanding that it was good to have choices. Before going to bed, Trevor took one last look around the apartment. He saw the improved walls, the steady light bulb in the ceiling, and the small details that showed how far they had come. He saw his parents, who were no longer weighed down by constant fear. He saw himself, a boy who understood that kindness, education, and perseverance mattered. He lay down, feeling calm and ready for whatever came next. He did not need to know every detail of the future. He had learned that doing the right thing, one day at a time, was enough. He closed his eyes, confident that he would continue growing, learning, and helping others as best he could. This was his life now, stable, hopeful, and guided by the simple truth he had discovered.